You know, some stories, they just take a turn you really don't see coming. That's what kind of grabbed me about Friends Stand United or FSU. I mean, here's this group, right? Comes out of the late 80s Boston hardcore scene
Yeah.
as this, like, really vocal anti-racist force. And yet, somewhere along the way, boom, they end up being known for the exact kind of violence they supposedly stood against. It's confusing.
It really is. And what we're looking at today, with the sources we have, Wikipedia pulling from Rolling Stone, Chicago Tribune, those documentaries like Boston Beatdown, even FBI stuff.
Right.
It's really the story of a group reacting to a very specific time, a specific place, and then, yeah, seemingly changing into something completely different. You have to ask, how does that actually happen?
It is exactly the questions.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to unpack in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We want to trace that path. Understand how a crew that started, seemingly with positive goals,
Yeah.
ends up with this reputation for, well, intimidation and violence, and eventually gets labeled a street gang by the FBI. It's complex. There's a lot here.
For sure. And it's important to remember, I think, that with all these different sources feeding into the picture, we're going to get different angles, different interpretations.
Yeah, sure.
Our job really is to pull it together, try and get to the core of this transformation.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. Late 1980s, Boston. Friends Stand United, founded by Elgin James.
Yeah.
And their focus, right from the start, seems pretty clear. Anti-fascist, anti-racist, anti-drug. A hardcore crew, deep in that punk scene, and also the straight-edge subculture.
Yeah, the straight edge part's interesting. For people who aren't familiar, that's the side of hardcore that avoids alcohol, tobacco, recreational drugs. Often casual sex, too.
Right. No drinking, no drugs.
And that commitment, that abstinence, it can build a really strong group identity. Discipline,
Right.
That probably helped FSU stick together early on.
Makes sense.
Plus, the whole hardcore scene back then was just buzzing with social, political stuff.
And FSU, while apparently open to everyone, race-wise, was mostly white guys.
Predominantly, yeah.
But the key thing early on, the sources say, is what they did. They were known for physically kicking white supremacists, neo-Nazis, any racist groups out of punk shows in Boston.
You can almost picture it.
Yeah, this crew literally fighting, throwing these guys out.
Right. It wasn't just like complaining about it. It was direct action. They were making themselves very visible, a physical force against stuff that just didn't belong in their scene.
And Elgin James himself, in that Rolling Stone piece, he was pretty blunt about why they did it early on.
What'd he say?
He said they never really had a political agenda. It was more of a visceral reaction. You're going to call me a nigger? I'm going to bash your face in with this fucking brick.
Wow. Okay.
Pretty raw, immediate, violent.
Yeah, that quote. It really shows how personal and reactive it was at first. But, that immediate, almost primal response, even if you understand it facing racism, maybe it also set a pattern. Like violence was okay, maybe even something to be, celebrated as the first option.
That's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just about fighting racists. James also mentioned later on, after they'd kind of pushed the neo-Nazis out,
Yeah.
he and other FSU guys started robbing drug dealers.
Ah, okay. That's a shift.
A significant one, right?
Yeah.
Was it like trying to keep that confrontational buzz going once the original enemy wasn't as obvious?
Yeah.
Or did it bring in something else? Power dynamics, maybe corruption?
That's a huge question. It points towards maybe moving away from, ideologically driven stuff towards maybe just keeping dominance or just finding another outlet for that aggression they'd already built up.
Then we get to this kind of turning point. The sources mentioned that once the racist groups weren't such a big presence in hardcore, FSU sort of fizzled out a bit. But then they came back, mid-90s, with what's called an unclear agenda. This is where it gets murky.
Yeah. Coming back without that clear, positive mission, that's telling, isn't it? It happens a lot with groups that form around fighting a common enemy.
Right.
Once that enemy seems gone or less of a threat, the group can struggle. Like, what are we now? And sometimes that leads to fighting inside the group or looking for new targets. Maybe that initial unity just dissolved and other things took over, like territory or just wanting to belong or just the sheer momentum of being seen as violent.
Exactly. Because that's when their reputation seems to flip completely. They start getting accused of being the intimidating, bullying presence they once fought against.
Wow.
Instead of protecting the scene, they're accused of attacking anyone within the scene who they thought crossed them. Taking over shows, policing them themselves. It's total reversal.
It really shows the danger, doesn't it? When a group's identity is just about being against something instead of for something positive, When the target fades, the group might just turn inward.
Yeah.
And start doing the very things they hated.
And you got to look at the name, too. Officially, Friends Stand United.
Right.
But inside the punk scene, way more common. Fuck shit up.
Ah, yeah.
That split in the name, it feels like it reflects that tension, doesn't it? Or maybe they even knew what they were becoming, this more aggressive thing.
That informal name, fuck shit up, it says a lot. It's a shift from unity based on, like, shared ideals to unity based on just being willing to cause chaos, be violent. It's way more aggressive. Less idealistic, for sure.
So fast forward to the early 2000s. FSU is spread out way beyond Boston. They've got chapters popping up in Portland, Maine, Philly, Chicago, Arizona, L.A., Seattle, upstate New York, Jersey.
Oh, okay.
Estimated membership, maybe around 200 people. This wasn't just a local Boston thing anymore. They were national.
That expansion, it suggests they want an influence beyond just their home turf. And it makes you wonder, how did these chapters, scattered all over, keep any link to that original anti-racist idea, if they even did?
Good question. And in 2004, they actually put out an official documentary, Boston Beatdown Volume 2.
Seriously, their own documentary.
Yeah, and the FBI, which remember later called them a street gang, said these films had disturbing footage of violent beatings, and that Elgin James and other members actually boasted about using violence. So they weren't just doing it, they were filming it, celebrating it maybe.
Making and sharing those films, that feels like a shift from just reacting with violence to something more performative, like maybe using it to build and keep their reputation through fear.
Interesting angle. But Elgin James, he claimed FSU was different from, say, biker gangs or other outlaw groups.
How so?
Because, according to him, they weren't about making money from illegal stuff. It wasn't about profit.
That's a key thing he's claiming. If profit wasn't the main goal, then what was? Was it just power, reputation, some kind of twisted loyalty, or something else driving all this violence?
Then the sources list this, just string of violent incidents. 2005, a guy named James Morrison gets killed at a show in New York. An FSU member is arrested.
Okay.
Reports were mixed about why, but a Confederate flag shirt got mentioned in some places.
Oof, that's disturbing, especially given where they started. It's like the complete opposite of their initial fight, but now they're allegedly the aggressors in a fatal fight.
Exactly, a chilling reversal.
Yeah.
Also, 2005, this band, Dangers, from California, they apparently got threats, intimidation from FSU.
Why?
Over a song they wrote criticizing FSU's violence.
Yeah.
Concerts got canceled. People in the Seattle scene were talking about how to push back against FSU.
So a band speaks out against violence and gets hit with more intimidation.
Yep.
That really just highlights how they'd seemingly become the thing they hated, right? Silencing people who disagreed using intimidation and violence.
Then, December 2005, an FSU member is shot and killed in Arizona. The story goes, FSU members, armed, attack people at a concert.
Oh, wow.
And one of the guys getting attacked, fearing for his life, got a gun and shot the FSU member who's apparently chasing him with a machete.
A machete? Jeez.
Paints a picture of FSU starting extreme violence and then facing deadly results.
That's a serious escalation.
Yeah.
Not just fists anymore.
Yep.
Allegedly using weapons, starting attacks, putting everyone in massive danger.
And in 2006, Seattle police reported FSU members attacking strangers, seemingly for no reason. Complaints about assaults in a club, too.
Random attacks.
Apparently. A police search turned up arrests of several FSU guys for having weapons and even cocaine with intent to distribute.
Cocaine? But James said they weren't about profit.
I know. How do you square that?
Well, it suggests maybe the story from the top, from the founder, didn't really match what all the members were doing, or maybe the reasons people were in the group just got muddier, more criminal over time.
Could be. And tragically, 2006 also had 3 FSU members convicted of murder. 2 separate incidents, New York and California.
Murder convictions.
Yeah, not small fights. These were killings with major legal consequences. This is where FSU's violence clearly crosses a huge line, legally speaking.
Absolutely. Moves way beyond just reputation and accusations right into the courts.
Yet, despite all this, FSU members were interviewed for a National Geographic doc about straight edge in 2008. And a Gangland episode, too.
No way.
Yeah. And they apparently talked openly about how they started and about their violent stuff, almost like they were owning it, embracing this darker image.
Participating in those shows. That's weirdly fascinating. Maybe they thought it was a way to, like, control their own story, assert their dominance, even if the story was mostly negative and violent by then.
Maybe. Anyway, Elgin James eventually leaves FSU. This is 2007.
Okay.
He said that Rolling Stone interview made him really think about violence responsibility. By then, he was the last original founder left.
The last one.
Yeah. Others had moved on. Some apparently even joined biker clubs, like the Outlaws, the Mongols.
Wow. Joining actual outlaw motorcycle clubs.
Seems like whatever that original vision was, it had just totally crumbled.
James leaving really feels like the end of an era for them, doesn't it? His comments suggest maybe he got disillusioned with where it all went, even though he was part of it early on. And yeah, former members drifting into established biker gangs, that says a lot about the direction FSU had taken.
And James's own story wasn't over. 2011, he gets sentenced to a year and a day in prison.
For what?
Trying to extort money from a guy in the band Mest way back in 2005. Supposedly to get a donation for FSU.
Extortion! Linked to FSU.
Even after he'd left, his past actions caught up. He did say at his sentencing, though, that he took responsibility.
Well, that incident really ties his own journey into those later, more problematic FSU activities. The extortion just reinforces that intimidation, coercion. They'd become standard tactics, it seems.
But FSU itself didn't just disappear when James left. As late as 2014, there was a big fight involving FSU guys at a music festival in Ohio.
Still going.
Apparently.
All right.
Reports of weapons again, machetes, guns. Shows that violence was still there, even without the founder.
It suggests the culture of violence in FSU just kept going on its own, huh? Even after key people left, maybe it became more decentralized, like different chapters doing their own thing with their own ideas of what FSU even was anymore.
According to one source, Modern Insurgent, FSU still exists today, like autonomous chapters across the country. Lower profile maybe, but still known in the hardcore scene.
Still around.
And Joe Hardcore McKay, who helped start the Philly chapter, he still runs that big annual This Is Hardcore festival.
Yeah.
Those connections in the scene are still there.
Yeah, that speaks to FSU's lasting impact, doesn't it? Even if they're less public now. The fact that chapters exist, key figures are still active, their legacy, good and bad, it's still echoing in that community.
So when you look back at the whole thing, it's just this incredibly complex, almost tragic story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Friends Stand United starts with this strong anti-racist mission in Boston, hardcore, actively fighting hate groups.
A clear, positive goal initially.
But over time, their methods just get more and more violent, intimidating, until the FBI calls them a street gang, and members end up convicted of serious crimes. It's such a stark, disturbing contrast to where they began.
What really hits me is how a group formed to fight one kind of aggression seemed to just fall into another kind. That initial visceral reaction against racism, maybe without meaning to, it paved the way for a culture where violence just became the answer for everything, and eventually it just swallowed up those original positive goals.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What does this whole FSU story tell us about how hard it can be for any group, even one starting with good intentions, to stick to its ideals over time? And what are those pressures, inside and outside, that can twist a group formed to fight one kind of bad thing into becoming something just as bad, or maybe even worse, something to mull over maybe?